Today we are reviewing fractions and decimals for part of our grand review. I have up on the smartboard 3 different kinds of fraction problems that should help you remember which or what to do when you see you're adding or subtracting fractions, multiplying fractions, or dividing fractions. Since all of these rules are newer to you, let's review them to make sure that you're knowing exactly what to do for each one. We're going to start Whoops, we'll get rid of that. We're going to start with subtracting fractions. When you subtract fractions, you first have to make sure that there's common denominators. Now remember, when you're making sure you have a common denominator, you can either look for the lowest common multiple or you can multiply them together. In this case, we're just going to multiply them together. We know that we'll have to reduce some more at the end, probably, but we can do it this way and make it work. So when you multiply 9 times 4, it equals 36. And now we look. 9 times what equals 36? We know 9 times 4 equals 36. And what you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. So 4 times 4 is 16. So we have to get 4 to equal 36 too. So we're 4 times 9 equals 36. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. 3 times 9 equals 27. Okay, now we've got a lot of mess here. So we know that this is all of our showing our work. So what I would suggest is rewriting the problem. So 3 and 27, 36 minus 2 and 16 36 is our new problem. We'll get rid of that again. Luckily, when we say 27 minus 16, we don't have to borrow. But sometimes we notice we do have to borrow. And then you know that we would take away from our whole number and make it happen over here. But today, we don't have to borrow this time. So we're going to keep it as 3 and 27 36. So 27 minus 16, 7 minus 6 is 1, 2 minus 1 is 1. Keeping the denominator, and 3 minus 2 is 1. So our answer is 1 and 11 36. Subtracting mixed numbers is trickier than adding mixed numbers. Remember, adding, you just have to make sure they have the common denominators, and then you can do your problem. For subtracting, first you have to do common denominators, then you have to check to make sure that you don't have to borrow. Okay? All right, let's move on to multiplying mixed numbers. Multiplying regular fractions, no problem. You just multiply the numerators times the denominators. But when you have a mixed number, it adds a little bit more to it. So we have to change them into improper fractions. Remember, you times, add, times, add. So 5 times 2 is 10. 10 plus 4 is 14. Change to an improper fraction. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 1 is 7. 7 6. Okay, so now we have to multiply 14 times 7. Now I'm not somebody who likes to do math in my head. So 14 times 7 is 20. 4 times 7 is 28. 7 times 1 is 7. Plus 2 is 9, equaling 98. 6 times 5 is 30. Can you leave it as an improper fraction? No, you have to do some more work. So 30 goes into 98. 3 goes into 9. 3 times. 30 times 3 is 90. 8 minus 0 is 8. 30 can't go into 8, so we have a remainder 3 and 8/30. But when you can reduce, you must reduce. And we know that 8 and 30 are both even numbers. So we can take a 2 out of both. 2 goes into 8, 4 times, 2 goes into 30, 15 times. And don't forget your whole number. So 3 and 4/15 is your answer. Lots of steps, but you can do it. This is nothing that you don't know how to do. When you divide, remember, we don't love dividing all the time, so we cross it out. But if you're going to cross that division symbol out, you have to do the reciprocal of that second fraction. Remember, you always do the reciprocal of the second fraction. Reciprocal means flip it. So you rewrite the problem 2/9 times 10 over 9. And then you do the work. 2 times 10 is 20. 9 times 9 is 81. I think you're done, but let's look at the factors just in case. 1, let's see, we know that 9 times 9 is 81. We know that 81 times 1 is 81. And 3 times 27 equals 81. The factors of 20, 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. Are there any common besides 1? Nope. So this is your answer, 20 over 81. You don't have to reduce any further. These are the review of fractions. So we've got mixed numbers when you add and subtract, making sure the denominator is similar. Whoops, sorry. And then we've got, and making sure you borrow if you need to. When you multiply, when you have to do mixed numbers, and then making sure you get it back down. Whoa, don't know where that went. Okay, and then when you divide fractions. Okay, next. Now the decimals. When you add and subtract decimals, you want to make sure that you line up the decimals. You kind of do a little dot to dot. So let's start. 14.26 plus 17. 17 is a whole number, so that means that decimal is right there. So 17.00, fill in those empty places with zeros. Then you line up that last decimal, 0, 3, 1, 4. Okay, that's important for you to do because if you were to subtract here and you would just not line it up right, it would be wrong. But if you didn't include these zeros, you might forget that you have to subtract and maybe borrow for that 4 if you're subtracting. But we're adding here, so it's okay. 4 plus 0 is 4. 1 plus 6 is 7. 3 plus 2, 5. Now we're going to dot to dot. Dot to dot. 4 plus 7 is 11. Carry the 1. 31.574. That's what you do when you add and subtract. You line them up, okay? When you multiply, you just do the problem like you normally would. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 5 is 15. You can do the 0. You don't need to. But if you wanted to, you can. Then you have to count how many are in the decimal places, which means how many numbers are after the decimal. We count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And you get 1.509. So you multiply, then count. Multiply, then count. Okay? When you divide, you're going to over, up. So you get rid of the decimal in your divisor, and then in order to keep the same value, you need to move it over here too. So over, up. So I'm going to rewrite that problem just because I don't like the mess. Do you see how it's the same? Okay, 9 goes into 5. It doesn't. 9 goes into 50. What is it? 5 times. 45. Bring down that 4. 9 goes into 54. Good. 6 times. Okay, and you have a 0 as your remainder. But if you didn't have a zero, when it's a decimal, you get to keep adding zeros if you need to until you can get that remainder completely taken care of and you don't have one at the end. When you have decimals, you don't want a remainder. So your answer is 5.6. Okay, when you add or subtract decimals, you line it up. When you multiply, you multiply. So that's a multiplication symbol. Multiply, then count. Okay, and when you divide, it's over, over, up. Okay, and I like to say line up and maybe a little dot to dot here because everybody likes a little dot to dot, don't they? Okay, so here's the little decimal review for adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing. Your fraction review, make sure that you have common denominators. So common denominators. Let's move that down. And borrow if necessary. Okay, and then when you multiply, you need to change from a mixed number. Okay, and then when you divide, let's put reciprocal because I hope that will trigger your memory to first cross out that division. So cross out the division and do the reciprocal. Okay, these are the reviews for fractions and decimals. Come talk to me if you have any problems.